Okay, I've got something really big. I posted it on my blog, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it to you. I'll read the blog to you, and I'll put a link to the blog underneath as well. It's not going to sound very natural. It's going to sound like I'm reading from something, and that's because I am. So I've been looking for this link between the fungal infection I've been telling people that they have, and 100% of them have it, targeted individuals, that is, and I finally found the connection between all of it. So I'm going to lay it out right here by reading my blog. The references are below, and I implore you to do your own research as well. So this connects the fungal infection with the heavy metals and everything else in your body. Here we go. It says, for a very long time, I've been telling targeted individuals that they are suffering from a fungal infection of the body, and that this infection is the sensitizer that's making them different from the person standing next to them. I've stated that this is the reason they're feeling shocks, vibrations, pains, pricks, twitches, auditory sounds, etc. I've also stated that metals in the body that create a battery out of the human body were in their bodies and at work as well. I knew this. I knew this from making myself the white rabbit and experimenting with myself for too long. It wasn't until now that I could make the connection between the fungus, the metals, and the sensations that targeted individuals feel and experience. This is the missing link that I've been looking for since I've started researching this. This is the missing information that will shut up and shut down any naysayers and people that still believe people are following them around with pocket weapons, laptop weapons, or that they target them with an implant with chips. Again, I never claimed that this never happened in the past. I'm only claiming that this is completely unnecessary now. After all, the goal of all these kinds of operations is to leave as little evidence as possible, and this is the pinnacle. Some years ago, I was messing with a battery-powered light. It ran off a typical alkaline battery, and I was having an issue with it staying on. So I was opening it up, and I was bending the contact springs, messing with it, putting it back together, and repeating. On my last attempt, something bad happened. I was lying on my back and felt some liquid on my lower stomach. Then I realized that battery acid was leaking out of one of the cheap batteries at an alarming rate, and it started to burn. Immediately, I tore my clothes off and hopped in the shower. It was burning like hell, and the acid that had ran down my stomach and towards my pubic area. I had wiped a little, but I didn't want to smear it anywhere else, so I got in the shower and got it diluted and taken care of. The burning was gone, but I noticed something strange when I got out of the shower and got dressed. It felt as if my intestines and insides had quit moving. Now, this isn't something that you usually notice. You're never really aware that your insides are subtly moving all the time. It's like a low hum in a house. You'll get used to it and not even hear it, and it's not until somebody abruptly turns it off or it abruptly turns off that you even notice it was there. This was the same situation with my intestines and insides. I didn't notice it until after the movement was gone, and it was a very strange feeling to have everything in my body sitting perfectly still. I was concerned because I wasn't sure exactly how long this would last. Eventually, the movement came back to my body, probably a couple days later or something. But the battery acid had certainly paralyzed it, at least temporarily, and I never forgot about it. And recently, I decided to do a little bit of research on a typical alkaline battery, and that research changed everything for me. I've had to believe since almost the beginning that the shock sensations, vibrations, pains, pokes, pseudo burns, etc. that people feel on their skin and bodies has to start from a sensitizer. I believe it's due to the body being polluted or sensitized with ferromagnetic, RF, radio frequency sensitive, or electrochemical metal of some type. I've referenced Nokia's patent on vibrating tattoo ink lots of times. This ink is made from ferromagnetic or electrosensitive powder such as iron oxide. When a person gets a tattoo with this kind of ink, it can be linked to their mobile device, and then their skin will vibrate if they receive a text message or a notification. Now, this tattoo ink has to start off as a dust. What if this dust were thrown into somebody's house? What if the particles were small enough that they could get into the skin? This would allow for someone up to thousands of miles away to make everything in the house, including the person, shake and vibrate, do other things. Eventually, it would wash off the person. But what if some nefarious person or agency was able to design something that would stick to the human skin and or in the body and continuously create these electrosensitive chemicals or metals? The missing link. It's been proven that 2 or more metals in the body create a battery. And here's where things get interesting. For years, I knew that there was a missing link between the metals that I knew were in my body and the fungal infection that had taken me over both internally and externally. When I would detox the heavy metals out of my body, my targeting symptoms would diminish greatly. However, I couldn't find the puzzle piece that would connect these metals with the fungus, but I knew something had to. It was driving me nuts. Finally, I found this missing link while researching the typical alkaline battery, and it blew my mind. As it turns out, a big thing in science right now is using mold and fungus to create alkaline and lithium batteries anywhere. One particular fungus is acremonium, produces manganese oxide on and in anything, especially people or animals, and creates a battery. Ironically, this fungus can take the shape of a target or bullseye pattern, the exact shape that lots of targets and other people claim to see on their eyes as floaters. Some can see them with the naked eye. Some can see them with the help of the reflection off of a microscope or a jeweler's loupe. What I mean by that is when you put your eye up to a microscope or a jeweler's loupe and you can see your eyelash really big. You know, it's getting a reflection and it's being amplified. If you can get that, you look around, you can start to see these targets floating around on your eyes with the help of that. All right. Infection from this fungus alone can cause arthritis, a myriad of different things, pneumonia, and subcutaneous infections. You have to read it. Go to my blog and read it. And do your own research. It lives in soil and dead plant matter, much like sporotrichosis. Once in the body, it is continuously creating manganese oxide, which means it's continuously creating electrosensitive chemicals. And if you don't believe me, in the Smithsonian, they brag about the fungus that can make a better lithium-ion battery due to the ability of the fungus to produce manganese oxide. This particular mold is Neurospora crassa, which means nerve spore. The manganese oxide produced has electrochemical properties. It becomes biomineralized, to quote the magazine. Now, the kicker about this is that the manganese oxide can also be used as a makeshift electrode as well. Some targets and unassuming targets would laugh when I told them they had a fungal infection. Some were curious. Some people listened. For some people, this infection is practically invisible. It wasn't and isn't until breaking up the film on their skin with a handful of Epsom salt baths that they realized they actually did have this fungal infection in and on their bodies. I was having a hard time connecting the electronic angle of all this with the fungal angle until this discovery. I knew the connection was important, but I couldn't connect the pieces until I started researching the alkaline battery and, more importantly, the manganese oxide in it. All it takes is water, and we're mostly water after all. Once I researched this, the missing link was connected. And then there's reference links to the Smithsonian there, and I believe I put another one up as well. Now, if a person's body has been infected with any of these particular fungal strains, or even a GMO version of this fungal strain, which is probably more likely the case, similar to this in sporotrichosis, the fungus in and on their bodies are continuously creating manganese oxide or lithium manganese oxide. This means their bodies are continuously making chemicals that have electrochemical properties. They are batteries. The necessary volts needed to cause the symptoms that people complain of are so little that it's almost undetectable. And what does this all mean? It means the fungus I've been talking about for so long is the actual battery, the power source and sensitizer for this electronic harassment. It also means that the manganese produced by this fungus can be used as electrodes. And then I show an image there. If a person becomes poisoned by manganese, and you have to be really saturated in this stuff, the symptoms can vary. Many people who are diagnosed with Parkinson's or have Parkinson's symptoms can actually have manganese poisoning. And then here's a list of the symptoms. You go through it. And it affects your dopamines. It can make you apathetic and weak. You get headaches. You can be confused, depressed, short-term memory loss, slurred speech, hallucinations, tremors, involuntary muscle movements, poor coordination, a mask-like or rigid face, staggering, or your gait screwed up. Your gait as you're walking. And it was usually miners and people who worked around kilns that developed this kind of stuff. So you may or may not have manganese poisoning. So, I just put that up as a reference thing. So let's move on. Here it shows it's a link to manganese ferrite blended with a multi-volt carbon nanotubes as microwave absorbing materials. Interesting. And then here's manganese and mold used as electrodes. And then we'll move on from there. So as a targeted individual, what does this all mean to you? It means that it's imperative that you continue to cleanse yourself of metals and continue to use antifungals like potassium iodide. We have had fungal infections that are creating the very radio frequency microwave sensitive chemicals that are used to sensitize and target individuals. These can react to almost any frequencies agencies choose to use. It can be used to jolt or even used as an antenna. What would normally just wash off you over time is being reproduced as the fungal infection spreads and just keeps making this manganese oxide. You may have had this infection much longer than you're targeting, and that's because what I refer to as the tipping point. I believe that once certain chemicals in your body hit a certain level, you begin to have these targeting symptoms, and I believe now that chemical is manganese oxide. This explains why some targets produce black specks on their bodies, even Morgellons patients. And 100% of targeted individuals have this infection, whether they realize it or not. It explains why 100% of these targets have this infection. It explains why targets seem to have crystal-like substances on their skin or like glitter or weird stuff. And here's a quote from the Smithsonian. You get this crusty, crystal-looking biomass. It explains why more targets cleanses their bodies. The more a target cleanses their bodies of metals and uses antifungals, the more their symptoms subside. It explains the weird pigment issues on the skin that targets deal with. Look up manganese and pigment. It explains some of the physical symptoms that targets have, such as shaking or a rigid face, if they have a lot of this in their system. And as I study this more, I'll be adding more to this. I believe this is the turning point in understanding what exactly is sensitizing us and making us different from, say, our neighbor or a roommate or a family member. And I mean that. So the more I learn about this, the more I'll let you know. And then underneath, I have a photo, which I'll put in the video, and it's an artist's rendering, or a rendering. It may not even be an artist's rendering, but it's a rendering of electricity moving through a mold that has been creating manganese oxide. So there you go. Check out my blog. I'll put the link below. And do research on your own. And the more that I learn, the more I will put up. But I finally made the connection between the mold and the electricity and the sensations and everything else. And I believe this. So I'll keep you updated. Thanks a lot, guys. And thanks to everybody who has donated to help me out. I was down for a while, but I have been doing so much research. It's intense. And I'm still sleeping a lot, but I'm when I do stuff, I'm getting a lot done. Thanks a lot.